The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Commander Hyunwoo stood at the human delegation table and watched as alien representatives whispered among themselves. Their voices carried fear like a disease spreading through the room. The massive holographic display in the center showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked dead systems, 12 of them, 12 entire star systems that had simply vanished from all sensors 3 days ago. Where billions of beings once lived, now there was only empty space and darkness. The Void Harbingers have returned, spoke Elder Thex of the Veth Empire. His crystalline body flickered with nervous energy. After 1,000 years of sleep, they hunger again. Hyunwoo had read about the Harbingers in old records, ancient beings of living shadow that consumed everything in their path. They fed on stars themselves, leaving nothing behind but cold emptiness. Most races considered them myths, stories to frighten children, but the 12 dead systems proved the stories were real. "We must evacuate the outer sectors immediately," said Queen Zila of the Kel Swarm. Her insect-like form trembled despite her brave words. "My people will begin moving to the galactic rim within the hour." "The Nimari Collective agrees," whispered Speaker Voss, his gaseous form swirling with panic. "We cannot fight beings that eat stars for breakfast. Retreat is our only option." Hyunwoo looked around the chamber. Every alien species represented here had technology far beyond humanity's capabilities. The Veth could manipulate pure energy with their crystal cities. The Kel commanded hive minds of trillions. The Nimari existed as living gas clouds that spanned entire solar systems, yet they all spoke of running away. "What about defensive strategies?" Hyunwoo asked. "Surely our combined fleets could mount some resistance." The chamber fell silent. Elder Thex's crystal form dimmed. "Young human, you do not understand. The Harbingers are not enemies to be fought. They are forces of nature. You cannot fight a black hole. You cannot argue with entropy itself. But we have to try," Hyunwoo insisted. "Billions of innocent lives are at stake." Queen Zilla made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "Innocent lives are exactly what we are trying to save by fleeing. The Harbingers show no mercy. They take everything." Meanwhile, 50 light-years away, Captain So Young stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance. Her ship was one of humanity's newest destroyers, though it would barely count as a scout vessel by alien standards. She studied the reports coming in from the Outer Rim colonies. "Captain, we're receiving evacuation requests from 17 human settlements," reported her communications officer. "They want transport to the inner systems." So Young frowned. "What did you tell them?" "That we're preparing defensive positions?" "Ma'am, same as always." "So?" Young nodded. "That was the human way. When danger came, humans dug in and fought. They built walls and sharpened weapons. The idea of simply running away felt wrong in their bones." Her science officer, Lieutenant Minho, looked up from his console. "Captain, I've been studying these Harbinger attack patterns. Something doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" Minho brought up a holographic display. "Look at how they move. They consumed these 12 systems in a perfect spiral pattern. Very organized, very efficient. But here's the strange part." He highlighted a section of space near the dead zones. "They avoided this region completely. It's almost like they went around it on purpose." So Young studied the map. "What's in that region?" "According to galactic charts, it's empty space. But I cross-referenced it with our own historical databases." Minho's face grew thoughtful. "Captain, that region contains the remains of Sol 4, what we used to call Mars before we terraformed it. One of our old colony sites? From 800 years ago. Long abandoned now, but there are still some ruins there. Archaeological sites mostly." So Young felt a chill run down her spine. Why would cosmic horrors avoid an empty human ruin? Before Minho could answer, alarms began blaring across the ship. The communications officer's face went pale. "Captain, we're receiving a priority. Transmission from command. The Harbinger fleet has been detected. They're heading directly for human space." Back at the Galactic Council, panic erupted as the same news reached the chamber. Representatives began shouting over each other in dozens of alien languages. Some were already gathering their belongings to leave. Order. Order, called the council speaker, an ancient being whose species had governed galactic affairs for millennia. We must coordinate our evacuations carefully to avoid chaos. Evacuations? Hyunwoo stood up. You're all abandoning your homeworlds without even trying to fight? Elder Thex turned his faceted head toward the human commander. Commander Hyunwoo, your species is young. You have not faced true cosmic horror. The Harbingers cannot be reasoned with or defeated. They simply are. Then why did they disappear for 1,000 years? Hyunwoo asked. If they're so unstoppable, why didn't they consume everything back then? The chamber grew quiet again. It was Queen Zila who finally spoke. The records from that time are unclear. There was some kind of incident. Something made them retreat to the void between galaxies. What kind of incident? We don't know, admitted Speaker Voss. The records were either lost or destroyed. All we know is that they left suddenly as if something had frightened them. Hyunwoo felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. When exactly did this happen? What year? The council speaker consulted his ancient archives. By your human calendar, it was approximately 2847 years ago. Minho's research flashed through Hyunwoo's memory. That was around the time early humans had first begun exploring beyond their solar system. Primitive ships and basic technology. Nothing that should have threatened cosmic entities. Yet the Harbingers had fled. I need to contact my government, Hyunwoo said. Humanity will not be evacuating. We're going to investigate what really happened 3,000 years ago. The alien representatives stared at him in shock. Some made sounds that might have been prayers or curses in their languages. As the council session dissolved into chaos, Hyunwoo felt something he hadn't expected. Not fear, but curiosity. If humanity's ancestors had somehow made the Harbingers retreat once before, maybe they could do it again. In the depths of space, the Harbinger fleet sensed the human presence. Their collective consciousness stirred with an emotion they had not felt in millennia: unease. The small, stubborn species that had once wounded them was still there, still defiant, still refusing to run when any sensible creature would flee. The Harbingers remembered pain. They remembered the impossible sting of mortal determination. They remembered why they had hidden in the dark for so long. But they were hungry now. Too hungry to let old fears stop them. The hunt would begin soon. Admiral Ji-hoon stood on the observation deck of the UES Horizon and watched the most impossible sight of his career. The mighty Veth Empire's crystal fleet was running away. Thousands of their ships filled the space around their homeworld. Each vessel gleamed like a cut diamond, beautiful and deadly. The Veth had conquered half the galaxy with these ships. Their energy weapons could crack planets in half. Their shields had never been broken in 10,000 years of warfare. But today they were fleeing like frightened children. Admiral, we're receiving another surrender transmission, reported his communications officer. The entire Veth Third Fleet requests safe passage through our space to reach the outer rim. Ji-hoon shook his head in disbelief. Surrender? They haven't even seen the enemy yet. Through the viewports, he watched Veth civilians loading onto massive transport ships. Whole cities were being abandoned. The crystal beings moved with desperate speed, leaving behind temples and monuments that had stood for millennia. Sir, the Kel Queens are asking the same thing, added another officer. They want to move their hive ships through the Centauri passage. That's 17 billion Kel asking for refugee status. 17 billion? Ji-hoon had fought alongside Kel warriors before. Each one was worth 10 human soldiers in combat. Their hive minds made them perfectly coordinated. They feared nothing, until now. On the planet below, Dr. Yoon-jung walked through the abandoned Veth capital city. Her archaeological team had been studying alien cultures for years, but she had never seen anything like this. The crystal beings had simply walked away from everything they owned. Doctor, look at this, called her assistant, pointing to strange markings on a temple wall. These symbols aren't in the normal Veth language. Yunjung studied the carvings. They were crude, scratched into the crystal as if someone had been in a desperate hurry. This is ancient Veth script, very old, maybe 5,000 years. She ran her scanner over the symbols and frowned. It says, "The hunger returns." And below that, "Run to the edge of everything. Hide where light dies." 5,000 years ago? Her assistant asked. But the harbingers only appeared 3 days ago. No, Yunjung said slowly. I think they appeared 5,000 years ago too, and maybe before that. This isn't their first visit. Her communicator buzzed. Dr. Yunjung, we're receiving similar reports from abandoned Nimari worlds, came Admiral Ji-hoon's voice. Every species is showing the same behavior. Panic retreat without any attempt to fight. Yunjung looked around the empty city. Admiral, I think this is genetic memory. These species have faced the harbingers before, many times. And every time, the only survivors were the ones who ran fast enough. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, Sergeant Dobbin was having a very different conversation with human colonists. Sergeant, when do the evacuation ships arrive? Asked Mayor Kim of New Seoul Colony. Dobbin looked at the man in confusion. Sir, there are no evacuation ships. We're here to set up defensive positions. The mayor blinked. Defense? Against those shadow things that eat stars? That's the plan, sir. A crowd had gathered around them. Miners, farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, regular people who had come to the frontier to build new lives. Dobbin expected them to panic just like the aliens had. Instead, Old Man Park stepped forward. He had been a soldier once, decades ago. Sergeant, what do you need us to do? Sir, to fight these things. What can we do to help? Dobbin felt a surge of pride. This was why she loved her species. When faced with the impossible, humans didn't run. They asked how they could help. We need trenches around the settlement, she said. Underground bunkers, and every weapon you can find. We don't have military weapons, said a young woman. Then we make them, Park replied grimly. Mining charges, chemical fertilizers, farm equipment. Everything can be a weapon if you're creative enough. Within hours, the entire colony was working. Children helped carry supplies. Elderly people shared stories of old wars. Everyone had a job to do. Dobbin watched them work and thought about the aliens fleeing across the galaxy. Did they have this? This stubborn refusal to give up? This willingness to stand together even when the odds were impossible? Back on the horizon, Admiral Ji-hoon was receiving reports from across human space. The pattern was the same everywhere. While alien civilizations evacuated entire star systems, humans were digging in and preparing to fight. Admiral, we have a problem, his intelligence officer reported. The Nimari Collective just sent us a warning. They say human resistance will only make the harbingers angry. They're begging us to evacuate before we make things worse for everyone. Ji-hoon laughed, but there was no humor in it. Make things worse? How exactly do we make the complete destruction of all life worse? Dr. Yunjung's voice crackled over the communication system. Admiral, I think I'm starting to understand something. I've been studying abandoned sites across 12 different species. They all have the same ancient warnings about the harbingers. What kind of warnings? Instructions for hiding. Rules for staying quiet. Ways to make yourself invisible. Yunjung paused. But Admiral, I found something else. Human archaeological sites from the same time periods. Our ancestors left very different messages. What did they say? Things like remember the cost of freedom and better to die standing than live kneeling. Admiral, while other species were learning to hide, humans were learning to fight. Lieutenant Minho's voice joined the conversation from the Defiance. That matches what I found in our historical databases. 3,000 years ago, early human explorers reported contact with shadow entities in the void between stars. The official records say they were just radiation phantoms. But, Ji-hoon prompted, but the unofficial logs tell a different story. Several human ships reported fighting unknown hostiles, ships that came back damaged, crews that came back changed, and then suddenly the report stopped. The harbingers retreated, Yunjung added. Right around the same time humans stopped reporting contact with shadow entities, Admiral Ji-hoon felt the pieces falling into place. So when the rest of the galaxy learned to run and hide, humans learned to fight back. And it worked, Minho said. Somehow impossibly it worked. In the depths of space, the Harbinger fleet continued its advance toward human territory. But their movement had changed. What had been a confident advance was now cautious probing. Scout ships moved ahead of the main fleet, testing the darkness for signs of resistance. The collective consciousness of the swarm stirred with ancient memories, pain, loss, the terrible shock of prey that fought back instead of fleeing. They remembered the bright agony of creatures who chose to burn rather than be consumed, but they were so hungry now. The 1,000 years of sleep had only made the emptiness worse. They needed to feed. They needed to grow. They needed to fill the cold void inside themselves with the warm light of living worlds. Even if those worlds fought back. Even if the small, impossible species still refused to run. The Harbingers had learned patience during their long exile. This time they would be ready for human defiance. This time they would not underestimate the creatures who dared to fight gods. But deep in their collective memory, a whisper of doubt remained. What if the humans had learned new tricks during the 1,000 years of peace? What if they were stronger now? What if this time, the humans were ready too? Commander Hyun-woo stood in the ancient archive vault beneath Geneva Station. The room held humanity's oldest records, dating back to the first days of space exploration. Most of the data crystals were barely readable after 3,000 years, but Dr. Eun-jung had found ways to extract fragments of information. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a holographic display. Captain Sarah Chen of the exploration vessel New Horizon, her final log entry from 2847 years ago. The recording flickered to life. A woman in an old-style spacesuit appeared, her face streaked with blood and exhaustion. Behind her, emergency lights flashed red. "This is Captain Chen. We encountered them in the void beyond Proxima. Shadow ships that eat light itself. They took the Beijing and the Moscow without warning. But we hurt them. God help us, we actually hurt them." The recording dissolved into static for a moment, then cleared. "They're not invincible. When we rammed the Shanghai into their flagship, it screamed. I didn't know darkness could scream. They're retreating now, but they'll be back. Tell Earth to prepare. Tell them that running only makes them hungry." The message ended abruptly. Hyun-woo felt a chill run down his spine. Ramming attacks? Against entities that consume stars. It gets stranger, Eun-jung said, bringing up another file. Medical reports from survivors of that era. They all described the same thing. Fighting the Harbingers changed people, made them more focused, more willing to sacrifice themselves for others. She showed him brain scans from the survivors. "Look at these neural patterns. The sections responsible for self-preservation are almost completely overridden by the areas that control protective instincts. These people literally rewired their own brains to value other lives more than their own." Meanwhile, at the edge of human space, the first battle had already begun. Captain So-young watched her tactical display as Harbinger scout ships emerged from dark space near Kepler Station. The shadow vessels moved unlike anything she had ever seen. They flowed through space like living ink, bending light around themselves. "All ships, this is Captain So-young. Remember the old logs. These things can be hurt. Target their bright spots and don't let them surround you." Her squadron of 12 destroyers faced 30 Harbinger scouts. The math was impossible, but humans had never been good at math when lives were at stake. "Defiance, this is Control," came Admiral Ji-hoon's voice over the comm. "You are cleared to engage at will." So-young smiled grimly. "You heard the Admiral. Let's show these shadows what humans do when they're cornered." The battle erupted in brilliant flashes of plasma and laser fire. The Harbinger ships moved like ghosts, phasing in and out of normal space. But where human weapons struck them, they bled light like wounded stars. Lieutenant Minho monitored the enemy communications from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up something from their ships. Not language exactly, but emotional resonance. They're surprised. Surprised? They remember human ships being smaller. Weaker. Our weapons are hitting harder than they expected. So Young watched as the destroyer Soul landed a direct hit on a Harbinger scout. The shadow ship convulsed and began leaking energy into space. Looks like we've learned a few tricks in the last 3,000 years. But the Harbingers were learning too. One of them phased directly through the hull of the destroyer Busan. The human ship's lights went out one by one as something dark moved through its corridors. Busan responds, so Young called, nothing but static. Then a voice crackled over the comm. Captain Lee of the Busan, his words thick with effort. They're inside the ship, in the walls, in the air itself, but they don't understand our systems, don't understand redundancy. So Young heard explosions over the comm. Captain Lee, evacuate your ship. Negative. We've got them trapped in the reactor chamber. If we overload the core, we can take 3 of them with us. Lee, no, there has to be another way. There is no other way. Tell my crew they died as humans. Tell Earth we remembered how to fight. The Busan exploded in a cascade of nuclear fire. When the light faded, 3 Harbinger ships were gone and the rest were retreating. But So Young felt no victory, only the cold weight of necessary sacrifice. Back on Earth, Dr. Yoon Jung made a disturbing discovery in the old medical files. Commander, I think I know why humans react differently to the Harbingers. It's in our evolution. She brought up a comparison chart showing human brain structure next to that of other species. Every other intelligent race in the galaxy evolved from prey animals, herd creatures, pack hunters that relied on group safety. When they face a superior predator, their instinct is to scatter and hide. And humans? Humans evolved from persistence hunters. We chased mammoths across continents until they collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't run from superior predators. We outlasted them. Hyun Woo studied the data. So when faced with the Harbingers, other species see an unstoppable force and run. Humans see a challenge and start planning how to win. Yoon Jung pulled up more files. Look at these combat reports from 3,000 years ago. Human tactics against the Harbingers included ramming, attacks, boarding parties, and suicide runs. Suicide runs? Ships loaded with antimatter, piloted directly into Harbinger formations. Crews who volunteered to die to hurt the enemy. Her voice grew quiet. The Harbingers had never encountered anything like it. In their experience, all intelligent life tries to preserve itself. Lieutenant Min Ho's voice came through the communications array from the Defiance. Command, I'm detecting massive Harbinger fleet movements. The main force is approaching human space. Estimate arrival in 18 hours. Admiral Ji-hoon's reply was calm. All ships prepare for the final battle. This is what we trained for. Across human space, the response was the same. Not panic, not flight, but grim determination. Civilian. Ships volunteered to carry supplies. Retired veterans returned to duty. Children too young to fight helped load weapons and prepare defenses. In the abandoned alien sectors, the fleeing civilizations monitored human communications with growing amazement. The impossible species was not only staying to fight, they were actually singing as they prepared for battle. Old war songs from their violent past, mixed with new hymns about standing together in the dark. The Veth Elder Thex spoke for all of them when he transmitted a message to the human fleet. You are magnificent fools. We will remember your courage when we rebuild our civilizations in the Outer Rim. Commander Hyunwoo replied simply, We're not planning to be remembered. We're planning to win. Deep in space, the Harbinger collective mind wrestled with ancient fears. The humans had grown stronger. Their ships hit harder. Their tactics were more refined, but they still carried that terrible willingness to die for others that had wounded the Harbingers so badly before. The swarm hesitated at the edge of human space. Behind them lay empty systems, drained of life. Ahead lay the bright defiance of a species that refused to learn fear. The Harbingers were hungry. But for the first time in eons, they were also afraid. The Battle of Terra Nova began at 0347 Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon and watched 10,000 Harbinger ships emerge from dark space like a spreading stain across the stars. His combined fleet numbered 300 vessels, the largest human armada ever assembled but still impossibly outnumbered. Around him, bridge officers worked with calm efficiency. No one spoke of the odds. All ships, this is Admiral Ji-hoon. Today we find out what humans are really made of. Remember Captain Chen? Remember the Busan? Remember why we fight? The response came back from 300 captains at once. For Earth, for humanity, for those who cannot fight. The Harbinger fleet moved forward like a living shadow. There, ships flowed and merged, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. At their center, something vast and ancient pulsed with dark energy. The Harbinger flagship, older than human civilization. Lieutenant Minho monitored the enemy communications from his post on the Defiance. Captain So Young, they're broadcasting something. Not words, but pure emotion. They're trying to project fear directly into our minds. So Young felt it then, a creeping dread that whispered of hopelessness and inevitable death. Around the bridge, several crew members began to tremble. "Helmsman, play music," So Young ordered. "Ma'am, any music. Something. Human." The opening notes of an old Korean folk song filled the bridge. Simple, beautiful, and utterly defiant in the face of cosmic horror. The fear began to fade. "All ships, play music," So Young broadcast. "Let them hear what humanity sounds like." Across the human fleet, 300 different songs began to play. Classical symphonies mixed with rock anthems. Lullabies blended with military marches. The chaotic beauty of human creativity spread through space like wildfire. The Harbinger advance faltered. Their perfect formations wavered as the music struck their collective consciousness like hammers against crystal. On Terra Nova's surface, Sergeant Dobbin crouched in a hastily built trench and watched shadow ships descend through the atmosphere. Her defense force was mostly civilians armed with mining equipment and farming tools. They should have been terrified, instead they were angry. "Those things killed the Busan," muttered Park, the old miner. "He hefted a chemical explosive like it was a grenade." "Good people died on that ship," Dobbin nodded. "That was the thing about humans. They took losses personally. Every death became fuel for the next fight. The first Harbinger ground forces materialized out of darkness, living shadows with burning eyes, moving like liquid night across the colony grounds. They flowed around defensive positions, ignoring bullets and energy weapons, until Park's explosive detonated inside one of them. The shadow creature screamed, a sound like tearing metal. For a moment its form became solid and vulnerable. The colonists opened fire with everything they had. "They can be hurt," Dobbin shouted. "Hit them with explosives first, then conventional weapons while they're solid." The battle for Terra Nova became a brutal close-quarters fight. Humans with improvised weapons against beings of living darkness. But every time a shadow fell, the humans learned something new about their enemies. In space, the main battle raged on multiple fronts. Captain So Young led her destroyer squadron in hit-and-run attacks against the Harbinger flanks. Her ships darted between the massive shadow vessels like wolves harassing a mammoth herd. "Defiance, this is Seoul." Captain Park's voice crackled over the comm. "We figured out their weak spots. The bright patches aren't weapons, they're sensory organs. Blind them and they can't coordinate." So Young watched her tactical display as human ships began targeting the glowing sections of Harbinger vessels. Each hit caused ripples of confusion through their formations. But the enemy was learning too. A group of shadow ships suddenly phase-shifted, appearing directly around the destroyer Incheon. The human ship disappeared in a cascade of dark energy. "This is Captain Kim of the Incheon," came a final transmission. "We're going to ramming speed. Tell my family I kept the old promise." The Incheon accelerated directly into the heart of the Harbinger formation and detonated its entire arsenal. The explosion tore through reality itself, taking 12 enemy ships with it. Admiral Ji-hoon felt each loss like a physical blow. But he also felt something else. Pride. These crews were dying, as humans had always died in war, taking enemies with them and buying time for others to live. Commander Hyun-woo had been monitoring the battle from his command ship when Dr. Yoon-jung made her breakthrough. "Commander, I've been analyzing the Harbinger communications that Min-ho intercepted. They're not just projecting fear at us. They're trying to understand us. They keep asking the same question over and over." "What question?" "Why do we fight? For strangers?" Their collective mind can't process individual sacrifice for the good of others. To them, it's literally impossible. Hyun-woo felt pieces clicking together in his mind. That's their weakness. They're a hive mind. Perfect unity, but no individual will. Exactly. And every time we do something that contradicts their worldview, it creates errors in their thinking, glitches in their coordination. Hyun-woo opened a channel to all human ships. "All vessels, this is Commander Hyun-woo. I need volunteers for a boarding mission. One-way trip into the Harbinger flagship." The response was immediate. "This is Captain Lee of the Daegu. We volunteer." "Captain Kim of the Ulsan. Count us in." The Mokpo requests permission to join the mission. Within minutes, 24 ships had volunteered for what was clearly a suicide run. Hyun-woo felt tears running down his cheeks. This was why humanity would win. Not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they were willing to die for each other. The boarding mission launched just as the battle reached its peak. 24 human ships accelerated toward the massive Harbinger flagship, broadcasting old Earth songs and reciting poetry as they flew into certain death. Dr. Yoon-jung had loaded their computers with everything that made humanity unique. Art, music, literature, philosophy. The chaotic creativity of a species that had never learned to think like everyone else. When the first boarding ship punched through the Harbinger flagship's hull, it didn't just carry weapons. It carried the essence of human individuality directly into the heart of a collective consciousness that had never encountered such a thing. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The Harbinger flagship convulsed as its unified mind tried to process the impossible contradictions of human nature. How could beings choose death over safety? How could they value strangers over themselves? How could they create beauty in the face of horror? Captain So-young watched from the Defiance. As cracks of light began spreading through the enemy flagship, "All ships concentrate fire on those bright spots. Something's happening." The human fleet poured everything they had into the weakening vessel. And deep inside the ship, Commander Hyun-woo and his boarding team fought their way toward the central consciousness, carrying their most potent weapon, the knowledge that even in the face of certain death, humans would choose to hope. Captain So-young's sacrifice lit the fuse that ignited the galaxy. Her final transmission reached every corner of known space, carried by quantum relays and emergency beacons. The recording showed her standing on the bridge of the Defiance as Harbinger shadows swarmed through the corridors behind her. "This is Captain So-young of the UES Defiance. To any who can hear this, remember that we stood together. Remember that we chose to burn bright rather than fade quietly. The darkness is not eternal. We are the fire that burns in the void." The ship's reactor overloaded 3 seconds later, taking 7 Harbinger vessels with it in a blast that could be seen from 3 star systems away. But something else spread outward from that explosion. Hope. In the abandoned Veth territories, Elder Thex watched the human battle footage with his crystalline form, flickering in amazement. "They're actually winning," he whispered to his council. "The impossible species is actually winning." Queen Zilla of the Kel swarm felt it too. Deep in her hive mind, something stirred that had been dormant for millennia. The memory of courage. The knowledge that sometimes survival meant fighting instead of fleeing. "Prepare the war swarms," she commanded. "We return to our homeworld." "My queen." Her advisor clicked nervously. "The Harbingers will destroy us." "Perhaps. But if the humans can face them with mining tools and old songs, perhaps we can face them with claws and wings." Speaker Voss of the Nimari Collective felt the shift like a tide turning. His gaseous consciousness had been scattered across 100 worlds in terror, but now it began to coalesce. "The small ones remind us of what we forgot," he said to himself. "We are not prey. We are the inheritors of stars." The response was not coordinated. There was no grand plan or alliance. But across the galaxy, the fleeing civilizations began to turn around. Not because they had become braver, but because humans had shown them that even the impossible could be attempted. Admiral Jihoon received the first Allied transmission while coordinating the defense of Terra Nova. Admiral, this is Elder Thex of the Veth Empire. Our crystal ships are moving to support your position. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Jihoon blinked in surprise. Elder Thex, I thought your people evacuated to the Outer Rim. We did, but we have decided that living in fear is not living at all. Your Captain So Young taught us that some things are worth dying for. Similar messages poured in from across the galaxy. Kelwar swarms emerging from hiding places. Nimari storm fleets gathering in the void. Even smaller species that had never been warriors were arming merchant vessels and heading toward the battle. Lieutenant Minho intercepted communications between the fleeing civilizations and felt his heart swell with pride. They weren't just returning to fight. They were learning human tactics, ramming attacks, boarding parties, self-sacrifice for the greater good. Humanity hadn't just found allies. They had created teachers, showing the galaxy how to fight like humans. On Terra Nova's surface, Sergeant Dobbin watched the sky fill with Allied ships, Veth crystal vessels that gleamed like jewels, Kel organic ships that moved like living creatures, Nimari storm clouds crackling with electricity. Sergeant, Old Man Park called out from his position. Looks like we started something. Dobbin grinned fiercely. That's what humans do. We make the impossible look contagious. The battle for Terra Nova became the center of a galaxy-wide uprising. As alien fleets arrived to support the humans, they brought their own unique weapons and tactics. But more importantly, they brought the courage they had learned from human example. The Veth discovered that their energy manipulation could disrupt Harbinger phase abilities. The Kel found that their hive minds could resist the enemy's fear, projection. The Nimari learned that their gaseous forms could slip inside shadow ships and tear them apart from within. But it was Dr. Yoon-jung who made the breakthrough that changed everything. Working frantically in her makeshift laboratory, she had been analyzing the wreckage of destroyed Harbinger ships. What she found challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about their ancient enemy. Commander Hyunwoo, she called over the communication system. The Harbingers aren't evil, they're terrified. Terrified. They're cosmic horrors that eat stars. No, listen to me. I found biological traces in their ships. These beings were once like us, individual creatures with hopes and dreams and fears. But something happened to them eons ago. Something so horrible that they chose to merge into a collective consciousness rather than face it alone. Hyunwoo felt a chill. What could scare beings powerful enough to consume solar systems? Death. Individual death. They were so afraid of dying alone that they gave up everything that made them individuals. They became perfect, unified, eternal. But in doing so, they lost what made existence worthwhile. The implications hit Hyunwoo like a physical blow. They're not trying to conquer us, they're trying to save us. In their minds, absorption into the collective is mercy. And every time they encounter a species that chooses individual death over collective survival, it reminds them of what they lost. That's why they flee. We represent their greatest fear and their deepest regret. Commander Hyunwoo made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Opening a channel to the Harbinger fleet, he broadcast not weapons fire or defiance, but something far more dangerous. Understanding. Ancient ones, he spoke into the void. We know what you fear. We know what you lost. You chose safety over meaning, existence over life. But it's not too late. You can still choose differently. The response came as a wave of pure emotion that crashed over every mind in the system. Rage, fear, denial, and underneath it all, a terrible longing for something lost long ago. The Harbinger fleet began to fragment. Some ships continued their attack, driven by eons of habit. But others hesitated, their ancient minds wrestling with possibilities they had tried to forget. In the chaos of that cosmic moment of doubt, the combined fleet of humans and their new allies struck with everything they had. Not to destroy, but to free. To show the Harbingers that individual choice was still possible, even after eternity. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Ships fought not just with weapons, but with songs, art, poetry, and the chaotic beauty of individual expression. Every human act of sacrifice, every alien moment of courage, every creative explosion of defiant hope struck the Harbinger collective consciousness like cracks in a dam. And slowly, impossibly, that dam began to break. The first Harbinger to break, free from the collective, screamed across every frequency as individuality returned to its ancient mind. The pain of remembering what it meant to be alone, to be mortal, to be truly alive. But with that pain came something the collective had forgotten, for eon's joy. 5 years after the Battle of Terra Nova, Admiral Ji-hoon stood in the Memorial Garden on Luna Station and watched children from a dozen different species play together. Human children chased Kel younglings, while Veth crystal spawn flickered, with laughter. Even a few young Nimari swirled playfully through the air. But the memorial wall dominated the garden. Thousands of names carved in stone representing those who had died in the war against the Harbingers. Captain So-young's name was at the top, her final words engraved below it. "We are the fire that burns in the void." "Admiral," came a familiar voice. Commander Hyun-woo approached, his hair now streaked with gray from the weight of leadership. "The Council is ready for your report." Ji-hoon nodded. The new Galactic Council was very different from the old one. Humans now held key positions, but more importantly, the entire structure had changed. Where once alien species had governed through rigid hierarchy and collective decision-making, now individual voices carried weight regardless of species. They walked together toward the council chambers, passing construction crews working on the new memorial stations. These weren't just monuments to the dead, but beacons placed throughout the galaxy. Each one broadcast a simple message into the void. Individual lives matter. Personal choice has value. You are not alone. "Any word from the Reformation fleet?" Ji-hoon asked. Hyun-woo smiled. "Lieutenant Minho reports success in the Centauri sector. 3 more Harbinger collectives have chosen to fragment into individuals. They're learning to be mortal again, slowly. It had been the war's strangest outcome. Rather than destroying the Harbingers, humanity had offered them something they thought they had lost forever: the right to die as individuals rather than exist as an eternal collective. Not all had chosen this path. Some Harbinger fleets had retreated to the dark spaces between galaxies, still clinging to their unified existence. But others had embraced the terrible beauty of individual mortality, scattering across the cosmos to rediscover what it meant to be truly alive. Dr. Eun-jung met them at the council chamber entrance. She now served as head of the new Department of Existential Studies, helping former collective beings adjust to individual consciousness. "How are our former enemies adapting?" Ji-hoon asked. "Better than expected," she replied. "The individual Harbingers are fascinating. Each one is developing unique personalities, interests, even art forms. Yesterday, one of them created a sculpture that made me cry. Beauty born from beings who had forgotten beauty existed." They entered the great hall where representatives from hundreds of species gathered. At the center of the chamber stood a figure that would have been impossible 5 years ago. A former Harbinger, its shadow form now shot through with veins of silver light that pulsed with individual thought. It spoke in a voice like distant thunder. "I am called Wanderer now. I chose this name because I wish to explore, to experience, to know what lies beyond the next star. My collective memory spans eons, but my individual existence is only 3 months old. Every day brings wonders I had forgotten could exist." Elder Thex of the Veth Empire stood and addressed the assembly. "The transformation continues across the galaxy. Former collective species are embracing individual identity, but we must remain vigilant. Some old Harbinger fleets still pose a threat to developing civilizations. Queen Zila of the Kel added, "My swarms have found several newly liberated Harbinger individuals struggling with the concept of loneliness. We are establishing support networks to help them adjust." Ji-hoon took the podium to deliver his report. The Memorial Station network is now operational across 12 sectors. Each beacon serves as both a tribute to those lost and a communication hub for isolated individuals across the galaxy. No consciousness should have to face the universe alone. But it was Sergeant Dabin's report that truly captured the war's legacy. Now a general, she oversaw the new Galactic Defense Initiative. "We've established training centers on 200 worlds," she announced. "Not just military training, but instruction in the human concepts of individual sacrifice for collective good. Other species are learning that true strength comes from choosing to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The session continued with reports from across the galaxy. Former collective beings learning to create art, individual harbingers becoming explorers and scientists, ancient civilizations rediscovering the value of personal choice and creative chaos. After the session ended, Ji-hoon found himself alone with Wanderer, the reformed harbinger. "Do you regret it?" Ji-hoon asked. "Giving up immortal unity for mortal individuality?" The being's silver veins pulsed thoughtfully. "Admiral, my collective existence spanned millions of years. I consumed countless civilizations and absorbed infinite knowledge. But in all that time I never experienced a single moment of genuine surprise or wonder." Wanderer gestured toward the memorial wall visible through the chamber windows. 3 days ago, I watched a human child give her favorite toy to another child who was crying. The sacrifice was tiny, meaningless in cosmic terms. Yet it filled me with an emotion I had never known in eons of existence. What emotion? Hope. The knowledge that consciousness can choose compassion over survival, beauty over efficiency, love over logic. "Your species taught us that being perfectly safe means being perfectly dead." Ji-hoon smiled. "That sounds like something Captain So-young would have said. I have studied her final transmission many times. We are the fire that burns in the void." She understood what we had forgotten. Fire consumes itself to give light and warmth to others. This is not weakness, but the highest form of existence. As night fell over Luna Station, Ji-hoon walked through the memorial garden one last time. The names on the wall seemed to glow in the starlight, each one representing a person who had chosen to burn bright rather than fade quietly. From across the galaxy came reports of former harbingers establishing homes on distant worlds, learning to farm and build and create. Some had become teachers, sharing their vast knowledge with younger species. Others had become artists, expressing eons of suppressed individuality in sculptures of dark energy and light. A few had even become parents, raising the first generation of harbinger children born as individuals rather than as parts of a collective. These younglings knew nothing of their parents' ancient hunger for absorption and unity. To them, the galaxy was a place of endless possibility where every star held potential for new discoveries. The war had ended not with the destruction of an ancient enemy, but with their liberation from their own fear of death and individuality. The harbingers had learned something they thought impossible, that existence had meaning precisely because it was temporary, that consciousness was valuable precisely because it was fragile. In the deepest reaches of space, the memorial stations continued their broadcasts, beaming messages of hope and individual worth into the cosmic dark. Each beacon was a lighthouse warning against the rocks of collective conformity and the false safety of surrendering personal identity. Humanity had sparked a cosmic inferno, but not one of destruction. They had lit the fire of individual consciousness across the galaxy, proving that even ancient cosmic horrors could choose to become something better. As Admiral Ji-hoon looked up at the stars, he thought of Captain So-young's final words. The fire did indeed burn in the void, and it showed no signs of going out. New species were discovering the courage to embrace individual identity. Former enemies were learning to create beauty from the ashes of their collective existence. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, Humanity had never been content with leaving things unchanged. In the end, they had done what humans did best. They had taken an impossible situation and made it better, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple revolutionary act of refusing to surrender their individual humanity to the seductive promise of collective safety. The fire burned on, and the universe was brighter for it.